Another lance aimed at Krisha, sending Sazarman tumbling to the ground, his senses clouded by the onslaught of arrows. As the dust settled, Arjuna advanced towards Drula's division, scattering showers of arrows like a stormy rain. The Kaurava warriors trembled before him, unable to withstand the ferocity of his attack. Like a fire-consuming tree straw, he scorched their ranks, leaving none unscathed. The king of the Pragjotishas, Bhagavatta, rode towards Arjuna on his massive elephant, its armor shining like clouds. The two warriors clashed in a fierce encounter, their chariots and elephants crashing into each other. Bhagavatta unleashed a torrent of arrows at Arjuna, but the latter deflected them with ease. Bhagavatta, undeterred, struck both Arjuna and Krisha with multiple shafts, sending them reeling. He then urged his elephant forward, intent on destroying the dew, but Janardana, quick-witted as ever, maneuvered his chariot to keep the elephant at bay. Arjuna, though attempted to strike down the elephant from behind, remembered the rules of fair fight and chose not to take advantage of the situation. The elephant, however, continued its rampage, sending other elephants, cars, and steeds crashing to the ground. Witnessing this carnage filled Arjuna with rages. The battle raged on. 10,000 Vaman fires and brave advanced towards Arjuna, determined to conquer him with daunt. The great epic of the Mahabharata unfolded on the battlefield, where the Pandavas, led by Arjuna, clashed with the forces of the Pragjotishas. Dhritarashtra, the blind king of Hastinapur, sought to know what had transpired in this fierce encounter. Sanjaya, his charioteer and confident, recounted the tale as Partha and Krisha fought against Bhagavatta's elephant. All creatures trembled with fear. Sanjaya began the elephant. A massive beast hurled showers of arrows at the dew-piercing Devaka's son with black iron shafts. Equipped with golden wings, Arjuna, undaunted, retaliated by cutting off Bhagavatta's bow and slaying his warrior protector. He then engaged in a fierce duel with the king himself, their lances clashing as they exchanged blows. But Arjuna was not to be underestimated. He cut each of Bhagavatta's 14 lances into 3 fragments. The battle raged on, with Arjuna cutting open the elephant's armor and sending it crashing to the ground. The beast, deprived of its protective covering, looked like a mountain stripped of its cloudy robes, its water-streaked body a testament to its wounds. Bhagavatta hurled a golden-tipped dart at Vasudeva, but Arjuna swiftly cut it into a king's standard. An umbrella fell before the onslaught of Arjuna's arrows, which pierced his chest with 10 swift shots. Bhagavatta grew enraged, hurling lances at Arjuna's head and shouting loudly. But Arjuna's diadem was displaced only briefly. He soon restored it and addressed Bhagavatta, saying, "Look well on this world." Bhagavatta's fury knew no bounds as he took up his bow and showered arrows upon both the Pandava and Govinda. Partha then cut off Bhagavatta's bow and quivers, striking him with 72 shafts that pierced his vital limbs. The king was pained beyond measure, but still he hurled a Vaishava whip-on at Arjuna. Kshiva, covering Arjuna, received the blow on his breast, whereupon the whip-on became a triumphal garland. Arjuna addressed Kshiva in distress, saying, "O sinless one, why dost thou not adhere to thy promise? If I sink in distress or become unable to resist, then mayst thou act." So Vasudeva replied, "I have 4 forms eternally engaged in protecting the worlds. I divided myself and ordained the good of the world." She revealed a secret. His 4th form lay dormant for 1,000 years, granting boons to those deserving them. Upon awakening, the earth had once asked for this boon on behalf of her son Nar. The sun beat down on the battle-scarred landscape as Arjuna, the mighty warrior of the Pandavas, charged forward with unwavering determination, his eyes fixed on the enemy lanes. He rode his chariot, its horses slain beneath him, but not before they had carried their master to this very spot. As Arjuna dismounted, he took aim with his Gandava, bow its twine echoing through the air like a clarion call to battle. Before him stood Vrishika and Akala, the 2 sons of Sovala, king of Gandhara. These brothers, renowned for their bravery, had been a thorn in Arjuna's side, all day raining arrows down upon him with unrelenting ferocity. But now, as the Pandava warrior took aim, his shafts sliced through the air, striking true time and again with each hit. Again Hara, warrior, fell, their bodies crashing to the earth like autumn leaves before an autumn gale. Vrishika's car was torn apart, its steed slain, its driver and umbrella and standard all reduced to splintered wood. Undeterred by the loss of his brothers, Sovala himself rallied his troops, a veritable tidal wave of steel charting towards Arjuna. Clubs, iron, balls, rocks, and Satyanas, the entire arsenal of the Gandharas, rained down upon the Pandava warrior, seeking to overwhelm him with sheer numbers, but Arjuna stood firm, his hands moving with lightning speed as he drew arrow after arrow from his quiver. His shafts pierced through armor and flesh, alike striking true again and again, until the Gandhara warriors lay strewn across a battlefield like so many autumned leaves. As the dust settled anew, three emerged Sekanai, the cunning advisor to Duryodhana, conjured up illusions to confound Arjuna. Clouds of arrows sate in his darts. All manner of projectiles rained down upon the Pandava warrior, seeking to break his concentration. But Arjuna was no ordinary warrior. He lawed as he dispelled Sekanai's illusions with ease his Jyotishka and Aditya weapons, banishing the darkness and drying up the waters that had seemed to rise from nowhere with each illusion. Shattered the Gandhara warriors, stumbled back their moral brokenness. The battle raged on. Arjuna rode forth once more his Gandhava bow, singing its deadly song as he scattered clouds of arrows across the battlefield. His aim was true, and one by one the Kaurava warriors fell before him, their cries echoing through the air like a chorus of despair. The field itself became a charnel house littered with the bodies of steeds, elephants, and men. Friend fought against friend, son against father, as each warrior sought to protect himself from Arjuna's. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Dhritarashtra, king of Hastinapura, gazed out at the scattered remnants of his army. His trusted advisor Sanjaya stood before him, recounting the tale of the day's events. Your divisions were broken and routed, O monarch, Sanjaya began, and all of us retreated quickly from the field. But many of our bravest warriors, inspired by their loyalty to your son and their own desire for glory, followed Drona into battle. Drona, the great preceptor, had rallied his troops with a fierce cry, and they charged forward against the Pandava army led by Yudhishthira. The two forces clashed in a frenzy of steel and arrows, each side determined to emerge victorious. As Sanjaya spoke, he described the chaos on the battlefield. The Kuras surged their troops to slay Drona, while your sons, O monarch, cried out for him to be spared. It was as if they were playing a game of chance with Drona as the stake in the midst of this turmoil. Nile, a young warrior from the Pandava army, had emerged as a force to be reckoned with. His arrows flew swift and true, cutting down Kuru warriors like dried grass before a raging fire. Drona's son Aswathaman smiled at Nile as he approached, taunting him to engage in single combat. Nile accepted the challenge, his face aglow with determination. The two warriors clashed their bows, singing out as they exchanged arrow for arrow. In the end, it was Aswathaman who emerged victorious, cutting down Nile with a birded arrow and sending him tumbling to the ground. The Pandava army reeled in shock at the loss of their brave warrior. But Sanjaya continued his tale, recounting the bravery of Bhima as he struck down Karna, and Drona's son, the mighty Mesna, fought on, his arrows flying swift and true even as he was surrounded by the enemies. The battle raged on. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath the feet of the warriors. Elephants clashed with elephants, their tusks crashing down upon the heads of fallen soldiers. Horses and chariots carrying wildly across the battlefield, their riders struggling to maintain control. In the midst of this chaos, Sanjaya spoke of the great Kar warriors who had fought on that day. Bhima and his companions, filled with rage and determination, advanced against Drona's army. They clashed in a frenzy of steel and arrows, each side determined to emerge victorious. As the sun began to set on the battlefield, Dhritarashtra gazed out at the carnage before him, his heart heavy with sorrow. Sanjaya's tale had painted a vivid picture of the day. The sun had set over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the weary warriors. The dust-stained coats of mail hung heavy on their shoulders, and the anxious glances they exchanged spoke of defeat. Sanjaya's words echoed in my mind as I watched Duryodhana's army retreat from the field, their tails between their legs. We made our way back to camp. The sounds of the battlefield grew fainter, replaced by the whispers of the wind and the distant praise of Faudnai's prowess. The countless merits of Arjuna were being spoken of in hushed tones, and the friendship of Kesava for Arjuna was on everyone's lips. It was a bittersweet reminder of their loss. As the next morning, Duryodhana's rage boiled over as he confronted Drona. You have set us down for men who should be destroyed by you. He spat, his words dripping with venom. You did not seize Yudhishthira. Today, despite having him within your reach, that foe whom you would seize in battle is incapable of escaping you. If once you get him within sight. Duryodhana's anger was palpable, and even I felt a shiver run down my spine as he spoke. Drona's response was measured, but his words carried weight. I always endeavor to achieve what is agreeable to thee. He sent his voice steady, The three worlds with the gods, the Ishras, the Parvas, the Ichas, the Nagas, and the Rakshasas cannot defeat the force that is protected by the diadem-decked Arjuna. He paused, his eyes flashing with determination. Today I will slay a mighty car warrior, one of the foremost heroes of the Pandavas. Today I will also form an array that is impenetrable by the very gods. As Drona spoke, the Sansaptakas once more challenged Arjuna to battle, and he took them away to the southern side of the field. The encounter between Arjuna and his enemies was one for the ages, a clash of titans that shook the very foundations of the earth. Meanwhile, Drona's array stood resplendent on the battlefield, its impenetrable circular formation, a marvel of strategy and skill. Abhimanyu, with the command of his sire's eldest brother, pierced this array in many places, achieving feats that would be remembered for generations to come. But even as Abhimanyu's bravery inspired awe, he was ultimately succumbed by Dasesna's son. As I watched him fall, my heart went out to Arjuna, who stood like a mountain of sorrow amidst the carnage. The Pandavas were filled with grief, while our troop was withdrawn. For nightly rest the memory of Abhimanyu's bravery would. In the midst of a fierce battle, Sanjaya stood before Dhritarashtra, the king of Hastinapura, and began to recount the tale of his grandchildren's bravery. Your 5 sons, along with Krisha, are an unstoppable force, he said. Their deeds in battle are nothing short of remarkable, and they have proven themselves time and again. Sanjaya's words were a testament to the Pandavas' unwavering dedication to righteousness. As he spoke, his eyes gazed out at the battlefield before them. Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, is a shining example of virtue. He continued, his devotion to truth and righteousness has earned him a place in heaven, where he resides in eternal bliss. Sanjaya's voice was filled with reverence as he spoke of Yudhishthira's many qualities, his intelligence, his achievements, and his unshakable fame. But it was not just Yudhishthira who had caught the attention of the gods. His brothers too were renowned for their bravery and prowess in battle. Arjuna, the wielder of Gandhava, is a force to be reckoned with. Sanjaya said his unwavering commitment to his vows has earned him a place among the greatest warriors of all time. And then there was Bhima, whose strength and ferocity on the battlefield were matched only by his humility. Sanjaya's words painted vivid pictures of each of the Pandavas' unique qualities. Nakula, with his reverence for superiors and his unwavering self-control, was a shining example of what it meant to be a true warrior. Sahadeva, meanwhile, was a paragon of knowledge and righteousness, his gravity and sweetness of temper inspiring awe in all who knew him. But among them all, one name stood out: Abhimanyu. The son of Subhadra had been born with an extraordinary destiny, and Sanjaya's words were filled with a sense of foreboding as he spoke of the young warrior's untimely death. I shall tell you of his bravery, Sanjaya said, finally, his voice heavy with emotion. But first bear your grief, O King. Dhritarashtra nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. He knew that what Sanjaya was about to say would be a tale of sorrow and loss, but he also knew that it was a story that needed to be told, and so with a heavy heart the old man began to recount the events leading up to Abhimanyu's tragic fate. A battle had begun in earnest, with both sides clashing in a frenzy of steel and blood. The Kauravas, led by Duryodhana, had formed a great circular array with their most skilled warriors stationed at its entrance. Among them was the mighty commander. The sun beat down on the battlefield as the armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and fury. Sanjaya, a wise and experienced warrior, watched with keen eyes as the Parthas, led by Vimasna, approached the formidable array protected by Bharadwaja's son. Drona, a master of the bow and an invincible warrior, stood at the forefront of his army, his eyes blazing with determination. His arrows flew like a hailstorm, striking down any who dared to approach him. The Parthas, including Satyakai, Tekadana, Drishtadyumna, Drupada, Abhimanyu, and many others, charged forward with valor in their hearts. But they were no match for Drona's unyielding strength as the battle raged on. Yudhishthira, the wise and just king of the Pandavas, beheld the scene before him. He saw his warriors faltering against Drona's unrelenting onslaught. The weight of responsibility fell upon him, and he knew that a bold plan was needed to turn the tide of battle. Yudhishthira turned to Abhimanyu, his brave and skilled son-in-law, and entrusted him with a crucial task. Abhimanyu, he said, you are the equal of Arjuna himself in battle. I charge you with breaking through Drona's array and creating an opening for us to follow. Abhimanyu, filled with determination and pride, accepted the challenge. He knew that his father had placed a great burden upon him, but he was confident in his own abilities. I will penetrate into this invincible array like an insect entering a blazing fire. He declared, today I will do what is beneficial to both our families, and please my maternal uncle as well. With these words of Abhimanyu ordered his charioteer Sumitra to urge the steeds forward towards Drola's army. The young warrior's heart pounded with excitement and fear as he prepared to face the unyielding Drona. His father's words echoed in his mind, "If you succeed, all creatures will behold the slaughter of a large number of hostile soldiers by yourself and unaided child." As Abhimanyu charged forward, Yudhishthira's words still resonated within him. "Let your strength be increased, O son of Suvadra." The young warrior's determination was fueled by his desire to prove himself and bring glory to his family. With a fierce cry, he plunged into the heart of Drona's array, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The fate of the battle hung in the balance, as Abhimanyu, the brave and unyielding son-in-law of Yudhishthira, embarked on his perilous journey. Would he succeed in the midst of the great battle, Abhimanyu, the brave son of Arjuna, urged his charioteer to hasten towards the army of Drona. The charioteer, however, cautioned Abhimanyu about the gravity of the task ahead and the superior prowess of Drona. But Abhimanyu, undeterred by these words, laughed them off and declared that he would not feel any anxiety in facing even Sakra himself on his Airavata, aided by all the celestials. With a heart full of courage and confidence, Abhimanyu urged his charioteer to proceed with speed towards Drona's army. The charioteer, though reluctant, obeyed Abhimanyu's command and urged his 3-year-old steeds decked with golden trappings towards the enemy lines. As they approached the Kaurava army, Abhimanyu was met by a sea of warriors. Led by Drona himself, the air was filled with the sound of diverse musical instruments. Shouts slapped to armpits and roars as the Kauravas advanced against him. But Abhimanyu, endued with great lightness of hands and knowledge of the vital parts of the body, quickly shot arrows that could penetrate into the very vitals. The battle raged on, with Abhimanyu cutting down warriors left and right, their bodies strewn across the field like insects falling upon a blazing fire. The earth was stained red with blood as Abhimanyu's shafts struck their targets, leaving behind a trail of destruction and chaos. As the fight continued, Abhimanyu seemed to be everywhere at once, his keen-edged weapons cutting through elephant warriors, elephants with standards and hooks, and foot soldiers protecting them from behind. The steeds of the Vanu, Kamolja, and Valaka breeds were seen to be deprived of their ornaments as Abhimanyu rode past them, his arrows striking true time and again. The rows of bells that adorned the steeds were torn away, leaving them lifeless on the field. Their riders lay by their sides, their faces contorted in death. The earth was filled with the stench of excreta ejected by the fallen warriors as they weltered in their own filth. As Abhimanyu continued to slaughter the Kaurava army, his feats became increasingly impossible for his foes to bear. He crushed a vast host of 3 kinds of forces, cars, elephants, and steeds, like the 3-eyed Mahadeva crushing the azure host. The warriors of Drona's army were left helpless, their mouths dry, eyes restless, bodies covered in sweat and hairs standing on end. In the face of such overwhelming defeat, the Kauravas' hopes began to dwindle. They cast vacant looks around them. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Sanjaya watched in awe. Duryodhana's rage had reached its boiling point, and he charged forward to confront Savadra's son Abhimanyu. But before he could reach him, Drona rallied the Kaurava warriors, urging them to rescue their king. The king Drona cried out, his voice carrying across the battlefield. Abhimanyu is a formidable foe, but we cannot let our king fall into his hands. The mighty warriors, inspired by Drona's words and driven by loyalty to their king, surrounded Abhimanyu with a hail of arrows, shot shafts that seemed to flee like snakes through the air, while Drona himself unleashed 17 arrows, each one piercing Abhimanyu's armor like a snake's fangs. But Abhimanyu would not be defeated so easily. He countered their attacks with his own sharp shafts, firing 3 arrows at each of his enemies and sending them flying back into Saray. His steeds, trained to respond to every command, galloped forward with a speed that seemed almost supernatural. As the battle raged on, Abhimanyu's rage grew, fueled by the snatches he had suffered at the hands of Duryodhana's warriors. He laughed as he fired arrow after arrow, his aim unerring, and his strength seemingly boundless. And warrior, the handsome son of Asmaka, tried to stand in his way. But Abhimanyu was too quick for him. With a swift and deadly precision, he cut down the warrior's steeds, charioteer, standard, and even 2 arms, leaving him lying on the ground. Asmaka's force wavered and fled as their leader fell. But Duryodhana's warriors refused to give up. Karna, Kripa, Drona, and Salya joined forces with Duryodhana, showering Abhimanyu with arrows that seemed to rain down like a storm. Abhimanyu fought on his body covered in arrows, but still he fired shaft after shaft at his enemies. He struck down 3 warriors, Seshanat, Dryalakana, and Kundavdin, with just 3 swift shots, but Karna would not be defeated. So easily recovering from the shock of Abhimanyu's earlier shot, he fired 25 arrows that seemed to pierce through armor and flesh like a hot knife through butter. Swadhaman and Kritavarman joined in striking Abhimanyu with their own shafts as the battle raged on. Abhimanyu was regarded by all as Yamat himself, armed with the news of death, his arrows scattered across the battlefield, striking down Salya, who sat down on his chariot's terrace and fainted away. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Dhritarashtra, king of Hastinapur, gazed out at the chouse. Before him, his son's army, the Kauravas, clashed with Arjuna, son of Abhimanyu, who was single-handedly taking on their finest warriors as Abhimanyu fought. His straight arrows flew swiftly and true, striking down enemy after enemy. Dhritarashtra asked Sanjaya, his charioteer and advisor, to describe the young warrior's prowess in battle. Sanjaya began to recount the tale of Abhimanyu's bravery. Behold, O King, Sanjaya said, the splendor of Abhimanyu's combat like a mighty tempest uprooting a mountain. He swept through the enemy ranks, cutting down their strongest warriors with ease. His arrows flew like a storm, leaving none to stand in his way. As Sanjaya spoke, the saying unfolded before Dhritarashtra's eyes. Abhimanyu had encountered Salya's brother, a fierce warrior who was determined to bring him down. The 2 clashed their bows, singing as they exchanged arrow after arrow. Abhimanyu, with his quick reflexes and lightning-fast movements, dodged and waved between the enemy arrows, striking back with deadly precision. His opponents were no match for him, and one by one they fell to the ground defeated. The Kaurava army was thrown into disarray as their charades fled in terror, but Abhimanyu did not rest on his laurels. He continued to fight, his arrows flying like a swarm of bees, striking down enemy after MS. The battle raged on. Dhritarashtra's eyes widened in amazement at the young warrior's prowess. Sanjaya's words painted a vivid picture of Abhimanyu's bravery, like the autumnal sun blazing across the sky. His bowstring sang out with every shot, and his palm slaps echoed through the air like thunder. The Kaurava army, once so proud and confident, now faltered before the onslaught of Abhimanyu's arrows. They turned tail and fled, abandoning their fallen comrades to the mercy of the young warrior. As the dust settled, Dhritarashtra gazed out upon the battlefield, his heart heavy with sorrow at the sight of his army in disarray. But even as he mourned his losses, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at Abhimanyu's unyielding spirit and unwavering courage. The young warrior had proven himself to be a true hero, one who would be remembered for generations to come. The sun beat down on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos that ensued. Dhritarashtra, the blind king of the Kauravas, sat on his throne, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. His son Duryodhana had just recounted to him the tale of Abhimanyu's bravery, and now he asked Sanjaya, his charioteer and advisor, to retell the story in greater detail. Sanjaya began to speak, his voice weaving a spell of excitement and awe over the king of Abhimanyu. The young son of Subhadra had ridden into battle on his chariot, arrows flying from his bow like a stormy circle of fire. He pierced Drona, Karna, and even Duryodhana himself, as if he were invincible. The warriors trembled before him, their eyes wide with fear. Dhritarashtra's curiosity was piqued, and he leaned forward in his throne. Tell me more, he urged. Sanjaya continued, painting a vivid picture of the battle-scarred landscape as Abhimanyu fought on Drona. The great preceptor gazed upon him with pride and admiration. This young warrior is like Skanda himself, he exclaimed. But Duryodhana's anger flared up, and he taunted his son to attack Abhimanyu. In the face of such overwhelming odds, the king's son, Dasasana, a fierce warrior, took up the challenge. I will slay this Abhimanyu myself, he roared like an infuriated elephant. And when I do, the Pandavas and their allies will be devastated, their hopes will be crushed, and they will lose heart. With a fierce cry, Dasasana charged towards Abhimanyu, his chariot racing across the battlefield like a thunderbolt. Abhimanyu, undaunted by the sheer number of his foes, stood firm, his arrows flying swift and true. The 2 warriors clashed in the whirlwind of steel and dust, their chariots describing beautiful circles as they fought. All the sound of drums and conches echoed through the air, mingling with the roars of violins and the crashing of cymbals. The battle raged on its fury, unrelenting as ever the menu and Dussezana exchanged blow for blow in a duel that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom of Sanjaya. Finished his tale, Dhritarashtra sat back in his throne, his heart heavy with foreboding. The battle had only just begun, but already he could see the threads of fate weaving themselves into a tapestry of sorrow and despair. In the midst of the epic battle of Abhimanyu, the intelligent and valorous prince lay wounded on the ground despite his mangled limbs. He smiled at Dussezana, who stood before him, and began to address him with a mix of sarcasm and disdain. By good fortune, Abhimanyu said, I behold you a vain herald ride before me, cruel and devoid of righteousness. You once injured king Yudhishthira in the assembly, relying on this seat and the skill of Subala's son. Your harsh speeches met in Bhima, and now, as a consequence of your actions, you are about to reap what you have sown. Of Abhimanyu's words dripped with venom as he taunted Dussezana, listing his many transgressions: robbery, wrathfulness, avarice, ignorance, hostilities towards kin, injustice, and persecution. Today, Abhimanyu declared, I shall chastise you with my arrows in the sight of the entire army. Today I shall free myself from the debt I owe to angry Krishna and my sire, who always craves an opportunity to punish you. With these words, Abhimanyu drew his bowstring, aiming a shaft as radiant as Yamazag dyes or Veyas. The arrow flew towards Dussezana with unerring precision, striking him in the shoulder joint and piercing deep into his body like a snake entering. And until Dussezana sat down on the terrace of his chariot, overwhelmed by pain, and soon the Pandavas, including the 5 sons of Drupada, Virata, the Panchalas, and the Kakeyas, erupted into leonine roars as they beheld Abhimanyu's feat. The troops of the Pandavas, filled with joy, caused diverse musical instruments to be beaten and blown. Abhimanyu's valor had vanquished their implacable foe, and they rejoiced at his triumph. However, Dussezana was not alone in the battle. Karna, the most honored of Brahmin, arrived on the scene, determined to rescue his son. Behold, Duryodhana said to Karna, the heroic Dussezana, who had been slaying our foes, has himself fallen prey to Abhimanyu's valor. Karna rained showers of sharp arrows upon Abhimanyu, but the prince, undaunted, pierced Radha's son with shafts. The battle raged on, with both sides trading blows and neither gaining the upper hand. Karna, however, was determined to vanquish Abhimanyu and turned his attention towards him. The clash between these 2 mighty warriors was intense, with both exchanging arrows and displaying their prowess. Abhimanyu's shafts. The battlefield was ablaze as Karna's younger brother Vrishesana charged into the fray. He stood tall, his bow in hand, and let out a mighty roar that echoed through the air. With a swift motion, he stretched the bowstring to its limits, ready to unleash a hail of arrows upon his enemies. Abhimanyu, the son of Savadra, was Vrishesana's target. He had already pierced Abhimanyu with 10 shafts, each one finding its mark on the young warrior's umbrella standard, charioteer, and steeds. But despite being wounded, Abhimanyu smiled as he beheld his antagonist's handiwork. Vrishesana, however, was not deterred by his brother's valiant efforts. He continued to rain down arrows upon Abhimanyu, who, with a fire's determination in his eyes, began to bend the bow and string it back for another shot. With a swift release of energy, he let fly an arrow that sliced through Vrishesana's defenses and severed his head from his body. The Bharata army watched in awe as Karna's brother fell to the ground, his head rolling away like a defeated enemy. Karna himself was overcome with grief at the sight of his brother's lifeless form. He had never felt such pain before, and it seemed as though he had been struck by a Karnakara tree that had been uprooted from its mountainous home. Meanwhile, Abhimanyu, fueled by his rage and determination, charged forward like a stormy wind, cutting through the Kaurava army with ease. His arrows flew swift and true, piercing the armor of even the strongest warriors. The battlefield was soon transformed into a sea of chaos as the Kauravas tried to flee from Abhimanyu's relentless onslaught. As the dust settled, it became clear that the Kaurava array had been broken. Their troops were in disarray, and their leaders were fleeing for their lives. Abhimanyu continued to rage on, his arrows flying like a swarm of locusts or a torrential downpour, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. In the midst of this maelstrom, Arjuna's son Abhimanyu stood tall, his conch blowing a fierce war cry that echoed across the battlefield. He was a burning brand, consuming everything in his path like dry grass set aflame by a raging fire. His arrows flew swift and true, piercing the armor of even the strongest warriors. As the battle raged on, the Kauravas began to flee in terror, their cries echoing through the air as they fell prey to Abhimanyu's relentless onslaught. The field was soon littered with the bodies of slain warriors, their arms and hands severed from their bodies, their bows and arrows lying broken, and still the noise of the battle. The sun beat down on the battlefield as Dhritarashtra, king of the Kurus, watched his son Abhimanyu charge into the fray, the young warrior barely a child in years, but strong and proud, rode into the heart of the enemy camp on his 3-year-old steeds. Who among our great warriors followed? Arjuna's son Dhritarashtra asked. His charioteer Sanjaya replied, Yudhishthira, Sikandin, Satyaki, Nakula, and Sahadeva, Trishadhyamna, Virata, Drupada, Ekaya, Dhrishtaktu, and the Matsya warrior all rushed to battle, and with them were Abhimanyu's sires, accompanied by his maternal uncles, those fierce fighters who arrayed themselves in order of battle. They followed the path that Abhimanyu had created, eager to rescue their beloved sons. The Kuru warriors watched the Pandavas' army surged forward, determined to save their kin. But Jayadratha, king of the Sainas, and a skilled warrior, stood firm against them with his celestial weapons at hand. He resisted the Pandavas like an elephant in a lullin, its massive strength unyielding. Dhritarashtra's eyes widened as he beheld Jayadratha's prowess. Sanjaya, he said, I think that Jayadratha bore a heavy burden alone, for it was solely upon him to resist the angry Pandavas. His might and heroism are truly wondrous. Dhritarashtra asked Sanjaya to tell him more about Jayadratha's story. Sanjaya began his tale. Jayadratha had once been vanquished by them after he insulted Draupadi, the queen of the Pandavas. Humiliated and seeking redemption, Jayadratha undertook ascetic austerities. He restrained his senses from all worldly desires, bearing hunger, thirst, and heat with equanimity. His body shriveled, his veins became visible beneath his skyness. Jayadratha practiced his penance. He invoked the eternal words of the Veda and paid homage to Mahadeva, the great god Shiva. Moved by Jayadratha's devotion, Shiva appeared to him in a dream and granted his wish. What boon do you desire? The god asked. Jayadratha bowed down, his heart filled with reverence. I seek the power, he said, to check the 5 sons of Pandu, Yudhishthira, them Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva. In battle, though they are mighty warriors, Shiva smiled upon Jayadratha and granted his wish. Except for Arjuna's son Abhimanyu, Jayadratha would be. In the midst of a fierce battle, Sanjaya stood before King Dhritarashtra and began to recount the tale of Jayadratha's bravery. Listen well, O monarch, Sanjaya said, his eyes gleaming with excitement, for I shall tell you of the prowess of the ruler of the Sindhusas. He spoke visions of the battlefield danced in the air. Jayadratha's chariot, drawn by majestic steeds, as fleet as the wind, came into view. The chariot itself shone like a vectress edifice in the sky, its silver standard bearing the emblem of a great boar gleaming with beauty, with his white umbrella and yak-tails fluttering above him. Jayadratha radiated an otherworldly splendor, reminiscent of the moon shining brightly in the firmament. As Sanjaya continued to narrate Jayadratha's prowess became evident, he drew his massive bow and unleashed a torrent of arrows, piercing the array of the Pandavas. At every turn, Satyaki fell victim to 3 arrows, while Vrikadra was struck by 8. Trishadhyamna and Drupada suffered similarly, each pierced by multiple shafts. The Kakyas were not spared either, as Jayadratha's bow sang with deadly precision. The ruler of the Sindhus seemed invincible, his feats becoming more remarkable by the minute. When Yudhishthira himself was struck by 70 arrows, it only served to heighten Jayadratha's reputation for bravery. The other heroes of the Pandava army were similarly targeted, each one falling before Jayadratha's unyielding onslaught. But then something extraordinary occurred. Bhima, enraged and determined, aimed at Jayadratha's bow and struck it with a single polished shaft. The ruler of the Sainas, however, was unfazed, quickly retrieving another bow and continuing his assault on the Pandavas. The battle raged on, with neither side giving quarter. Jayadratha's steeds were felled, but he continued to fight, undeterred by the loss. Emma, witnessing this display of resilience, leaped from his car and commandeered Satyaki's vehicle, much like a lion claiming dominion over a mountain peak. The troops, watching from the sidelings, erupted into cheers as Jayadratha's prowess became clear to all. Even the Pandavas themselves acknowledged his bravery, their faces reflecting awe at the ruler of the Sindhus, who had single-handedly resisted their collective might. As Sanjaya concluded his tale, King Dhritarashtra gazed upon him with newfound respect for Jayadratha's unyielding spirit. The path that Bhima had forced through the enemy lines was indeed filled by the ruler of the Sindhus, and those who had dared to oppose him were left in awe of his invincibility. And this moment it became clear that, in the heat of battle, Sanjaya watched as the ruler of the Sindhus clashed with the Pandavas. The son of Arjuna, Abhimanyu, was like a Makra agitating the Essene, sending heroic showers into the Kaurava army. The principal warriors of the Kaurava army rushed to counter him, each according to their rank and presidencies. The battle raged on. Abhimanyu's charioteer expertly maneuvered his car through the crowded field, dodging enemy arrows and shields. Abhimanyu himself was a whirlwind of activity, cutting down, afterful with his sharp shafts. He slew Vrishesna's charioteer and cut off Vrishesna's bow, sending the prince fleeing on his steeds. The Kaurava warriors were filled with joy at this turn of events, exclaiming, "Excellent, excellent," as they saw Abhimanyu's prowess. But their triumph was short-lived, for Vaisakya soon appeared on the scene, determined to bring down the young warrior with 60 golden-winged arrows. He pierced Abhimanyu and taunted him, saying, "You shall not escape with life. As long as I am alive." Undeterred, Abhimanyu drew a far-reaching shaft from his quiver and struck Vaisakya in the chest, sending the prince crashing to the ground. The death of their leader only fueled the Kaurava warriors' fury, and they surrounded Abhimanyu, stretching their bows and arrows like a dark, unending sea. The battle reached its climax. Abhimanyu's wrath knew no bounds. With his shafts flying like a stormy wind, he cut down enemy after enemy, sending limbs and heads flying in all directions. The earth was strewn with the fallen, their floral wreaths and ornaments scattered among the wreckage of chariots, shields, and golden chains. The field of battle presented a terrifying sight, filled with slain Kshatriyas, who had lived and died with great heroism. Their coats of mail, once shining bright, now lay broken and battered on the ground. Abhimanyu's own form became invisible amidst the chaos, but his coat of mail adorned with gold remained visible, a beacon of his unyielding fury. He carried through the battlefield, slaying enemy after enemy. None could gaze upon him without being blinded by his blazing effulgence. He was like the sun itself, shining brightly in all directions, his shafts flying forth like rays of light to strike down those who dared oppose him. The battle raged on, a maelstrom of steel and blood, with Abhimanyu at its center, unstoppable and unyielding.
The sun beat down upon the battlefield as the armies clashed in a frenzy of steel, and Sanjaya watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation as the young Prince Abhimanyu, son of Arjuna, tore through the ranks of the Kaurava army like a force of nature. Abhimanyu's prowess was unmatched, his skills hung to perfection. By years of training under the great warrior, he moved with a fluidity that belied his youth, his chariot slicing through the enemy lines with deadly precision. The warriors who faced him were no match for his ferocity, and they fell before him like wheat before a scythe. As Abhimanyu charged forward, his enemies were filled with a sense of wonder and dread. They had never seen anyone like him before, a young man with the strength and skill of 1,000 warriors. His chariot was a blur of motion, its wheels spinning as he cut through the enemy ranks with ease. But even Abhimanyu's incredible abilities could not hold back the tide of battle. Forever the Prince Rupmara, the son of Salya, rallied his troops and charged forward, determined to take down the young warrior. With a mighty roar, Rupmara launched himself at Abhimanyu, firing 3 shafts into his chest and 3 more into his arms. Abhimanyu's reach was swift and merciless. With a single sweep of his sword, he cut down Rupmara and sent him crashing to the ground. The prince's body lay there still and silent as Abhimanyu turned his attention to the next wave of attackers. The battle raged on for what seemed like hours, with neither side giving an inch. But slowly Abhimanyu began to gain the upper hand. His Gandharva whip, on a mysterious and powerful tool given to him by the great warrior Tamburu, allowed him to confound his foes and cut through their ranks with ease. The sun began to set on the battlefield. Abhimanyu stood victorious, but battered his chariot was covered in arrows, its wheels creaking as it struggled to move. But even as he faced the next wave of attackers, the young prince knew that he had won a great victory, one that would be remembered for generations to come. In the end, it was not Abhimanyu who faltered, but his enemies. One by one, they fell before him, their bodies broken and still on the ground. And as the dust settled, the young prince stood tall, his chest heaving with exertion, his eyes blazing with a fire-sinner light. For in that moment Abhimanyu was invincible, a true warrior forged in the fire of battle and tempered by the will to survive.
In the midst of a fierce battle, Dhritarashtra, the blind king of Hastinapura, sat in his chambers, listening intently to the tale of Sanjaya, his charioteer. The story was one of great valor and bravery of a young warrior named Abhimanyu, the son of Subhadra, who had single-handedly fought against the combined forces of Dhritarashtra's army. Sanjaya spoke. Dhritarashtra's eyes grew wide with wonder, his mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the tale. "Tell me, O Sutta, He said, "What course was pursued by my warriors? After Duryodhana was beaten back and 100 princes slain, Sanjaya's voice took on a somber tone as he recounted the events. They unfolded the warriors of Dhritarashtra's army had been routed, their bodies. Drenched in sweat, their eyes wild with fear, they abandoned their wounded comrades, and fled urging their steeds and elephants to their utmost speed. The great warrior Drona, along with his son and other mighty Kar warriors, rushed forward against Abhimanyu. But the young prince stood firm, his heart unbroken. On by one, the warriors of Dhritarashtra's army fell before him, their armor pierced by Abhimanyu's arrows. Lakshman, a brave warrior and grandson of Dhritarashtra, was struck down by Abhimanyu's sharp shafts. As he lay dying, Abhimanyu addressed his conqueror with a fierce cry, "Look well on this world, for thou shalt soon have to go to the other in the very sight of all thy kinsmen. I will dispatch thee to Yamuzabad." The words were like a spark that ignited a fire within Duryodhana's heart. He rallied his troops and urged them forward against Abhimanyu, but even their combined might could not stand against the young prince's bravery. One by one they fell before him, until only Kratha's son remained. Kratha, a warrior of great strength and nobility, fought valiantly against Abhimanyu, but in the end his armor was pierced, his bow and shafts cut off as he lay dying. Abhimanyu continued to rain arrows upon the enemy forces, his aim honoring his heart. Unwavering, the battle raged on, with Abhimanyu at its center, a whirlwind of steel and fury that left no opponent standing. And when Kratha's son finally fell, the other heroic combatants turned away from the fight, their hearts heavy with defeat. The tale of Abhimanyu's bravery would live on forever, a testament to the power of courage and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The sun beat down upon the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the clashing armies. Dhritarashtra, king of the Hastinapuras, gazed out at the Chels, his eyes fixed on the young warrior who had pierced their lines. Abhimanyu, son of Savadra, and Arjuna, who are the heroes of my army that surround him. Dhritarashtra asked his charioteer Sanjaya. Sanjaya's voice was a steady drone as he recounted the tale of Abhimanyu's bravery. Drona, Kripa, Karna, Drona's son Aswatham, and Vyadvala, and Pritavarman, these 6 great warriors have surrounded him. As Sanjaya spoke, the scene unfolded like a tapestry before Dhritarashtra's eyes. Abhimanyu astride his 3-year-old steeds, their muscles rippling beneath their glossy coats, galloped through the fray with an unyielding fury. His shafts flew swift and true, striking down king after king as he rode. Drona, his eyes blazing with a fire's intensity, loose arrow after arrow at Abhimanyu. But the young warrior parried each shot with ease, his own arrows piercing Drona's armor like cotton knives through. But Aswathaman, son of Drona, joined the fray, striking Abhimanyu with 25 small arrows. But the young warrior merely stood firm, his eyes flashing with defiance. Karna, the mighty warrior from Anga, charged forward on his chariot, his broad-headed arrows flying towards Abhimanyu like a hailstorm. But the young warrior was not to be caught off guard. He struck Karna's steeds and charioteers down with swift efficiency, leaving the warrior himself vulnerable. The battle raged on. The warriors of the Hastinapuras fell one by one before Abhimanyu's unyielding onslaught. Vyadvala, the ruler of the Kosala, charged forward on his chariot, but Abhimanyu pierced him with a strong arrow, sending the king tumbling to the ground. The sight of their leader fallen sent 10,000 kings fleeing in terror, their armor clattering as they abandoned the field. Dhritarashtra's face went pale as he beheld the carnage before him. His warriors, once so proud and confident, now lay defeated at Abhimanyu's feet. Sanjaya's voice trailed off as Dhritarashtra turned to him. Ginshuk, the son of Savadra, has indeed proven himself a hero worthy of his lineage, Sanjaya said softly, and as the king gazed out upon the battlefield, he knew that the tide of war had shifted irrevocably. Abhimanyu's bravery would not soon be forgotten. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Faudnai's son Karna clashed with Arjuna's son Abhimanyu. The young warrior had already pierced Karna with a barbed arrow, and 50 more shafts infuriating him. Further, Karna retaliated by piercing Abhimanyu with an equal number of arrows, but to their surprise the youth looked even more resplendent, covered in blood. Abhimanyu's rage was palpable as he unleashed his fury upon Karna, causing him to be bathed in blood. The 2 warriors, both mangled and bloody, resembled a pair of flowering Kinsukas of Abhimanyu, then slew 6 of Karna's brave counselors. Their steeds and charioteers, falling with the undaunted Abhimanyu, continued his rampage fearlessly, piercing other great bowmen with 10 arrows each. His feat seemed highly wonderful to the assembled warriors. He then slew Eswick to a young prince from Megiddo along with his 4 steeds and charioteer using 6 straight shafts. The Bolgia, prince of Martikovid, bearing the device of an elephant on his banner, fell to Epimenes' sharp razor-headed arrow. The youth then uttered a loud shout as he began to scatter his shafts in all directions. Decesena's son meanwhile pierced Epimenes' 4 steeds with 4 arrows, and his charioteer with one of Epimenes' father Arjuna pierced Decesena's son with 10 fleet shafts, and addressed him in a loud tone, saying, "Thee, sire, has fled like a cord. Thou knowest how to fight, but thou shalt not escape today with life of Epimenes, the long arrow at his foe." But the son of Drona cut it down with 3 shafts as the battle raged. On Celia was pierced in the chest by Arjuna's son with 9 highly equipped arrows. That feat seemed highly wonderful to all who witnessed it. Epimenes then slew 5 warriors, named Sectronjaya, Chandriktu Mahamagba, Savarkas, and Shuryavasa. Duryodhana turned to Drona and said, "Let us grind this one together, else he will slay us all." Karna, the son of Vikartna, also sought Drona's counsel, saying, "Epimenes grindeth us all. Tell us the means by which we may slay him." Drona observed Epimenes with vigilance, and said, "Behold the lightness of hand and quickness of motion of this lion among men. This son of Arjuna, in the track of his car, only his bow drawn to a circle can be seen. So quickly the sun beat down on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chase. Sanjay's voice echoed through the air as he recounted the tale of Epimenes, the son of Subhadra, and Arjuna, the joy of Vishnu's sister. He began, "Napama Neve looked exceedingly beautiful on the field of battle, decked with the weapons of Vishnu himself attireth. He shone like a second Janardana." Sanjaya spoke the scene unfolded before us. Epimenes, his locks waving in the air, stood tall, his supreme weapon upraised in his hands. The kings, beholding him, and the wheel in his hands, became filled with anxiety, cutting it into 100 fragments. Undeterred, Epimenes took up a mighty mass, his eyes blazing with determination. Deprived of his bow and car, and divested also of his wheel by his foes, Epimenes rushed against the Swathaman, beholding the mass upraised, which looked like the blazing thunderbolt. Swathaman rapidly alighted from his car and took 3 long leaps to avoid Epimenes' deadly blow. Epimenes struck down the Swathaman steeds and 2 Parshanite charioteers. With each the mighty car warrior, pierced all over with arrows, looked like a porcupine, his body a testament to the ferocity of battle. Then he pressed Silva's son, Kalakya, down into the earth, and slew 77 Gandhara followers. As Epimenes continued his rampage, 10 car warriors of the Brahmavesataya race fell before him, followed by 10 huge elephants. His path led him towards the car of Dusasena's son, where he crushed the latter's car and steeds, pressing them down into the earth. The invincible son of Dusasena, taking up his mass, rushed at Epimenes, saying, "Wait, wait." The 2 cousins, with upraised masses, began to strike each other, desirous of achieving each other's death. Each struck the other with the mass ends, and both fell down on the earth. Like 2 uprooted standards erected to the honor of Indra, Dusasena's son rose first, striking Epimenes with the mass on the crown of his head, stupefied by the violence of that stroke, as also with the fact he had undergone. Epimenes fell on the earth, deprived of his senses. Thus one who had ground the whole army like an elephant grinding lotus stalks in a lake was slain. Epimenes lay dead on the field. The heroic warrior looked like a wild elephant slain by the hunters. The fallen hero was then surrounded by the troops, and as the sun began to set on the battlefield, Sanjay's words painted a vivid picture of the carnage that had unfolded. "We returned to our encampment in the evening," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Our bodies were covered in blood, and we were still reeling from the enemy's arrows." The king listened intently as Sanjay recounted their tale of voyage. They made their way back through the battlefield, the sky transformed into a deep crimson hue like the tender petals of a lotus flower. The sun sank low in the western hills, casting a golden glow over the carnage below. It was as if the very earth itself had been ravaged. Sanjaya set his voice barely above a whisper. The field of battle was strewn with the motionless bodies of countless elephants, their massive forms lying like crested hills torn apart by thunder. The air was thick with the stench of death, and the sound of jackals howling in the distance added to the sense of unease. The earth itself seemed to be mourning the loss of life, its surface scared by the wreckage of chariots and the bodies of their riders. As night began to fall, a terrible river seemed to flow through the battlefield, its waters crimson with the blood of the fallen chariots lay shattered on its banks, their wooden frames splintered, and broken elephants stood like rocks their massive bodies lifeless, while human heads formed the smaller stones that lined the river's bed. The air was filled with the sounds of scavengers feasting on the dead, dogs, jackals, and carnivorous birds, all gathered to devour the flesh of the slain. Rakshasas and Pisacas joined in their repulsive forms, a testament to their unholy appetites. They laughed and sang as they tore at the bodies, their voices carrying on the wind as Sanjaya spoke his words, conjured up images of a carnival of death, where creatures from all corners of the world had gathered to feast on the fallen. The warriors who had fought and died on this field now rose up, their bodies dancing in a macabre waltz, as they made their way back through the carnage. And then amidst the chaos, Sanjaya's voice faltered. "We saw Abhimanyu," he said, his words barely above a whisper. He lay on the field, his ornaments displaced, and fallen off his body shone like a sacrificial fire, still warm with life. The king listened in silence as Sanjaya finished his tale, the weight of their losses sinking deep into his heart. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the battlefield. The Pandava warriors, their armor dented and worn, sat around King Yudhishthira, their eyes fixed on the ground in grief. They were still reeling from the loss of Abhimanyu, the young son of Subhadra, and Arjuna's nephew Sanjaya. The wise old sage stood before them, his voice heavy with sorrow, as he narrated the events of the day after the slaughter of that hare, that leader of car divisions. He began. The Pandava warriors left their chariots and discarded their armor, sitting around the king in despair. Yudhishthira's eyes were clouded with tears as he gazed at Sanjaya, his voice cracking with emotionalness of Abhimanyu. He cried out from desire of achieving my good. "You pierced the array formed by Drona and his soldiers. You encountered them in battle, those mighty bowmen, with great courage and skill, but they were no match for your valor." Yudhishthira's words dripped with regret as he recalled Abhimanyu's bravery. "You encountered our implacable Dussasana in battle," he continued, "and with your arrows you caused that warrior to flee from the field, deprived of his senses." The king's eyes wandered, his gaze drifting towards Arjuna and Subhadra, who sat nearby, their faces etched with sorrow. Yudhishthira's voice trembled as he spoke his words, a lamentation for the loss of Abhimanyu, alas, the heroic son of Arjuna. He mourned, having crossed the vast sea of Drona's army, was ultimately obliged to become a guest in Yamazabad upon encountering the son of Dussasana. Sanjaya's voice echoed through the silence, his words weaving a tapestry of sorrow. "When Abhimanyu is slain, how shall I cast my eyes on Arjuna, and also the blessed Subhadra, deprived of her favorite son?" he asked. The king's lamentations continued, as if pouring out all the anguish in his heart. Yudhishthira spoke his words, became a mixture of self-reproach and guilt, desirous of achieving what is good, he said, and expectant of victory. "Is I who have done this great evil unto Subhadra and Kesava and Arjuna?" His eyes dropped to the ground as he recalled the events that had led to Abhimanyu's death. The king's words dripped with self-criticism. "He that is covetous never beholdeth his faults," he said. "Covetousness spring from folly, collectors of honey. See."
In the midst of a sorrowful scene, Yudhishthira, Kantai's son, and the rightful king of Hastinapura, sat lamenting the loss of his brother's child. Abhimanyu, the brave young warrior, had been slain in battle by the forces of Duryodhana, surrounded by numerous great warriors. Despite being a mere child, Abhimanyu had fought valiantly against desperate odds, and Yudhishthira was consumed by grief as he sat lost in his sorrow. The illustrious Rishi Krisha Dwapana Vesa approached him with compassion in his eyes. Vesa began to speak words of solace to the grieving king. "O Yudhishthira, thou art a master of all knowledge and wisdom," Vesa said gently. "He is not befitting for one such as you to be overcome by calamities." Vesa continued, "That brave youth Abhimanyu, having slain numerous foes, has ascended to heaven. Indeed, he acted like one of matured years, though he was but a child." Vesa's words were meant to comfort Yudhishthira, but the king's grief ran deep. Yudhishthira replied, "Alas, these lords of earth, who lie on the bare ground, slain in the midst of their forces bereft of consciousness. They were possessed of great might, others again were endued with the impetuosity and might of the very wind." He reflected on the bravery of the warriors who had fallen, and how even they, despite their great prowess, could not escape the clutches of death. Yudhishthira's words tumbled forth like a river in flood as he asked Vesa to explain the mystery of death. "O grandsire, thou that resemblest a god, tell me this, whence is death, whose offspring is death?" What is death? Why it is death? Take away creatures. The king's questions were laced with a deep sense of wonder and Oedipus sensing. Yudhishthira's distress began to recite an ancient story. In days of old, he said, there was a king named Acampana, who was afflicted by the greatest grief on account of his son's death. The story unfolded like a tapestry woven from threads of sorrow and loss. Acampana's son, Hera, had been a mighty warrior equal to Indra or Vishnu himself in splendor. He had fought against countless foes and achieved great feats, but ultimately fell on the battlefield. His father, King Acampana, was consumed by grief, unable to regain his peace of mind. It was then that Narada, the celestial rishi, appeared before him. The blessed king told Narada everything that had happened.
In a distant era, the universe was teeming with life. Creatures of diverse kinds roamed the earth, each unique in their own way. Then a devoted being gazed upon this wondrous sight, and felt an overwhelming sense of compassion. He turned to the illustrious Lord Mahadeva, his voice filled with emotion. O Lord, you have created such a vast array of beings, only to now consume them through your fiery wrath. Seeing this, I am filled with sorrow. Be inclined to grace, O great one. Mahadeva's response was one of introspection. I had no desire to destroy the universe, he said. My intention was to bring balance to the earth, which was burdened by the weight of countless creatures. The goddess Earth herself urged me to take action, but I could find no means to destroy the infinite creation. It was then that wrath possessed me. As Mahadeva spoke, his words revealed a complex web of emotions, a desire for balance, a sense of responsibility, and the all-consuming power of wrath. Rudra, another devoted being, joined the conversation, his voice filled with urgency. Be inclined to grace, O Lord of the universe, he implored. Do not cherish this wrath that threatens to destroy all creatures, both mobile and immobile. Through your mercy, let the threefold universe, past, present, and future, exist in harmony. As Rudra spoke, his words painted a vivid picture of the destruction unfolding before them. The fire born from Mahadeva's wrath raged on, consuming rocks, trees, rivers, herbs, and grass. Alike it was exterminating the very fabric of existence. Rudra continued, this is the boon I saw, said, O divine being, that all created things belonging to you may not be destroyed. Your creatures endowed with life must not cease to be. Let your wrath be appeased. Let it be annihilated in your own self. Cast your eye upon your creations, inspired by a desire to do them good. His words hung in the air like a prayer, seeking to still the flames of destruction. As Mahadeva listened to Rudra's plea, something within him began to shift. He saw the devastation wrought by his wrath, and felt the weight of his responsibility as creator with a newfound sense of compassion. He extinguished the fire, ending its destructive path. In that moment, he declared the duties of production and emancipation, guiding principles for the well-being of all creatures. As the flames subsided, the new being emerged from Mahadeva's diverse senses. She was dark, red, and tawny, her tongue, face, and eyes aglow with fiery energy. Adorned with brilliant earrings and ornaments, she smiled at the two lords of the universe before setting out for the southern quarter. Brahma, controller of creation and destruction. In a distant realm, Narada, a wise and revered sage, stood before Brahma, the creator of the universe, as a witness to a poignant conversation between Brahma and death, personified by a woman named Naraka. The saint unfolded in the presence of Narada, who would later recount the events. Naraka, with joined hands and a humble demeanor, approached Brahma, her voice trembling with concern. O Lord of creation, she said, how can I as a woman commit such a cruel act? I fear unrighteousness greatly. My heart itches at the thought of causing harm to those dear to me. Sons, friends, brothers, fathers, and husbands, the tears of sorrow-stricken beings fill my eyes with fear. Brahma, unmoved by Naraka's plea, instructed Death to carry out his duty without hesitation or remorse. You have been intended for the destruction of creatures. He said, go forth, destroy all creatures, and do not concern yourself with the consequences. Brahma's words were laced with a sense of inevitability, as if the fate of the universe depended on Death's actions. Naraka, however, was not swayed by Brahma's command. She remained steadfast in her resolve to protect living beings from harm. Her devotion to doing good and avoiding evil led her to seek an alternative path. With a deep sense of conviction, she begged Brahma for permission to undertake severe ascetic penances as a means of cleansing herself of any potential sin. Brahma, observing Narika's unwavering commitment to righteousness, eventually relented. He revealed that death would not be held accountable for her actions. If she followed his guidance, you shall commit no sin by slaying these creatures. He said, my words can never be futile. Eternal virtue shall always be Phineas. The conversation unfolded. Brahma outlined a plan to guide Narika in her duties as death. He instructed her to focus on removing the root causes of suffering: covetousness, wrath, malice, jealousy, quarrel, folly, and shamelessness, rather than simply taking